Emerging from the depths of the abyss, I found myself disoriented in a strangely familiar room. But being at a loss, I could hardly remember when and where I had encountered her before. My discomfort increased when I noticed a tube awkwardly inserted into my nostril, and the cacophony of voices gradually sharpened my consciousness. Amid the noise, I could make out the distinct voice of my wife, who was asking for something from a figure in a white coat. "How is he? What happened?" Her questions aroused a fleeting wave of hostility in me, but the reason for my discontent eluded my understanding. The figure in the white coat replied, "Currently, we are not sure about his health. We're going to run some tests tomorrow morning to assess possible damage to his heart. In the meantime, we'll keep him under observation in the intensive care unit overnight. We plan to administer sedatives to ensure that he has a comfortable rest. In addition, we will maintain his oxygen supply." When I felt a slight prick in my arm, I was overcome by an unusual feeling of stiffness, and after a few moments I found myself sinking back into the familiar dark abyss. When I woke up, I was greeted by the morning light, accompanied by the sight of a nurse carefully adjusting a fork attached to my arm. When I looked around the room, a lot of instruments strapped to my body informed me that I was inside the walls of the intensive care unit. My wife, sitting in an armchair by the window, was peacefully dozing, causing me a slight irritation. But the reason for my irritation escaped my memory for a moment. The nurse, suddenly realizing my consciousness, greeted me with a warm voice. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. How are you feeling this morning?" My parched throat allowed me to croak in response. "Sullen." "Drink this and you'll feel better," she said softly, holding a straw to my parched lips. I obediently took a sip of water, but the sound of our conversation seemed to wake up my dozing wife. "Jack, are you okay, my love? I'm truly sorry for what happened." My head went blank, and I began to reflect on what had happened. Trying to piece together the fragments of memories, I desperately searched for an explanation of my current condition and the surrounding environment. And then, like a switch, the events of the previous evening cleared up in my head. The catalyst for my uncontrollable rage lit up, shedding light on the darkness that enveloped me. "You!" I shouted to my wife, overcoming my anger. "Just go away!" My wife stared at me, horror reflected on her face. Panic gripped the ward, alarms howled, and the nurse frantically tried to restore calm. "Mr. Carter, please try to calm down. Mrs. Carter, you need to leave immediately." The nurse spoke urgently to my wife while adjusting the valve on the floor. After a few seconds, I was plunged back into the soothing darkness. The last thing I remember is the sound of my wife sobbing as she left the intensive care unit. When I woke up, I noticed that the room was flooded with sunlight, which indicated that it was probably noon. I heard my son David's voice asking about my condition. The whole family is also worried about his mental state. The doctor assured him that I should wake up soon, and as soon as this happens, tests will be carried out to assess the condition of my heart and other important indicators. We can count on getting an idea of his physical condition closer to noon. As for his mental state, it's better that you or another family member keep an eye on him. Please sit down, Mrs. Carter, and talk to him. I have been informed that he reacts strongly negatively to your mother, and therefore we ask her to refrain from being around until their marital problems are resolved. These issues may require the help of a psychiatrist or marriage counselor, but first we need to assess his physical condition. Thank you, doctor, for your recommendations. In the absence of my mother, I will take on the role of the official representative of the family. It's all clear, the doctor replied, turning his attention to my hospital bed. Mr. Carter, I'm glad to see that you've woken up and come to your senses. We will start testing immediately. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling? Is there anything I can do to help you? Well, you can make sure your mother stays away from me, and please tell John Masters that I need to see him as soon as possible. John Masters, your lawyer, right? All right, Dad, if that's your wish. I'll do my best to arrange a meeting with him tomorrow, but you have to explain what's going on. Mom is on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I understand, son, and we can discuss this later. Can you tell me how it all started? What is the reason for my intense anger at the wife I've lived with for 25 years? To find an answer, I have to revisit the painful chapter 12 years ago when I found out about my wife's infidelity. The revelation shocked me because I never expected that the person I cherished most in the world would betray our family. At that time, I thought we had a happy marriage and 3 wonderful children, 12-year-old David, 10-year-old Sandra, and 7-year-old Michael. I had a stable job, and my amazing wife Ginger, who was 35 at the time, worked part-time as a bank operator. I felt in my gut that something was wrong in our marriage, and pretty soon I came across unusual signs that reinforced my suspicions. Our intimate moments were reduced to almost zero, and while searching in her purse for a checkbook, I came across a receipt from the motel for the previous Tuesday, the day when I was on a business trip. Intrigued, I reached deeper into her bag and found an inconspicuous compartment in the lining. Inside, I found a package of contraceptives, 2 of which, oddly enough, were missing. This discovery prompted me to explore our household finances while she was at work one Saturday morning. I usually trusted her to manage our finances and pay the bills, so I never felt the need to dig through our records. But what caught my attention was that I noticed on one of our credit cards numerous expenses twice the amount of the previous month, and all of them were related to a motel located near the airport. These expenses coincided with the periods when I went on business trips. I had a question. If she was really dating a lover, then why did she pay for the room? Could another woman be her lover? In the course of further investigation, I came across her mobile phone accounts and found a frequently dialed number that I could not recognize. Now it went beyond mere suspicion. Feeling tightness in my chest and a wave of nausea, I tried to hide in the bathroom. Sitting on the toilet seat, I hoped that these disturbing feelings would subside. But while I was waiting, doubts began to torment my mind. Could she really be cheating on me? And if so, why? Am I not giving her enough love? I thought our intimate life was fulfilling, but now I was plagued by insecurity. Desperate for answers, I decided to get to the truth. Eventually, the feeling of malaise and anxiety eased, but it became clear that I needed to take precautions to prevent a possible heart attack. Based on this, I made an appointment with our lawyer John, realizing that it was necessary to protect myself in the future. This coming Tuesday, I found myself in an awkward situation. Despite the fact that Ginger didn't talk about anything, I tried to maintain the appearance of normality. But when she expressed a desire for intimacy, I was unable to reciprocate and easily attributed it to the stress caused by a new work project. Surprisingly, she seemed to understand me and was content with hugging me. Having decided to get to the truth, I decided to take a day off from work and consult with John about the possibility of Ginger's participation in the novel. Although he was shocked by this assumption, he advised me to collect strong evidence of treason to be sure. He offered to use the services of a licensed private investigator. In order to collect the necessary evidence and visual support for my claims, I turned to a knowledgeable person for advice. This person not only provided me with valuable information about my limited child custody rights, but also offered a potentially more cost-effective and beneficial approach for the well-being of children. According to their recommendation, it would be in everyone's best interests if I told my partner about cheating in order to save our marriage and maintain a stable family environment. Although I took note of the advice given to me, I decided to hire a private investigator to document the fact of infidelity for greater certainty. The person who advised me agreed that this cautious step would most likely be wise, and even provided me with the contact details, address and phone number, of a reputable private investigator, whom he personally vouched for. Back at the office, I didn't waste any time, and made an appointment with investigator Sam Davis the next day. During our conversation, Sam's intelligence and acuity of perception showed up, who recognized the potential validity of my suspicions after learning about the evidence I had discovered. Noticing that the alleged affair had occurred during my absence from the city, he asked about my immediate plans for the trip. I informed him that I had a meeting scheduled for next Tuesday in Denver. I would fly out on Monday morning and return on Wednesday. Considering that there was only one motel involved in the alleged affair, he decided to focus his attention on it. In addition, he asked one of his assistants to monitor her actions, starting from the moment I left on Monday. To gather more information, he asked for permission to tap our home phone and discreetly install audio recorders with sound activation in her car and in our house. He also asked if my wife knew about my upcoming trip. I informed him that I had only recently found out about it in the morning and had not yet had time to inform Ginger. He informed me that he urgently needed to break into her car and house to install recording devices, stressing that I should not inform her about this until he had installed them. Considering that she was busy at work at the time and her car was parked at the bank, we quickly headed there. He had discreetly installed a sound-activated voice recorder under the driver's seat. Then we proceeded to our residence, where he connected to our phone and hid various wireless mini microphones throughout the room. The receiver and recording device were hidden in an unlocked shed located behind our house. According to him, such a method would allow him to instruct someone to pick up the records daily while my wife is not at home. At his request, I gave him the spare key to Ginger's car and assured him that the assistant would regularly replace the tapes there. When he noticed the number I found in Ginger's cell phone lock, he said he would find out the owner of the number. He informed me that he would contact me, and with that, I returned to work. That evening at dinner, I mentioned to Ginger about my upcoming business trip, and she looked rather melancholic because of my next absence. I couldn't help but notice the familiar tightness in my chest. I was constantly feeling sick, and this feeling never seemed to leave me. Despite this, I continued to live my daily life, anxiously awaiting news from Sam. If she was playing the role of a loving wife, then I knew I had to do the same as a loving husband. I had an intimate relationship with Ginger that weekend to prevent any suspicion. I decided to express my love for you and acknowledge that you occupy an important place in my life and the lives of our children. Why would that be, dear? We haven't been this close since our children were born, she asked. I wanted to let you know how deeply I care about you and also express my gratitude for everything you do. Sometimes I'm afraid that I'm being taken for granted. If you feel depressed and need support, my love, don't be shy, tell me about it. I deeply appreciate everything you are doing to preserve our marriage and family unity. Thank you, Jack, and rest assured, I'll let you know when I need your support. She laughed. I will miss you during your absence. Please keep me in your thoughts and stay faithful. Darling, I've always been loyal to you and I'm not going to back down. I'm glad to hear you say that, dear. How did you behave while I was gone? It was a moment of truth, and without hesitation she replied, You are my one and only. You and our children are my only goal, as they say. I am grateful to you for these words. Our marriage and family are impeccable. We should never put them in danger. I totally agree, and now I need to rest. You've exhausted me. Good night, my love. Surprisingly, she didn't react to my words in any way. Perhaps I misjudged her. Only time will tell the truth. Despite all my efforts, I couldn't sleep that night, and images of her betraying me in a motel room kept spinning in my head. On Monday morning, I said goodbye to Ginger before heading to the airport. In accordance with our usual daily routine before leaving, I took the time to remind our children of the need to behave well and obey their mother. Driving away from our house, I felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety, which made me quickly stop on the side of the road around the corner. Feeling my breathing getting uneven, I reached for the paper bag I had prepared in advance and started breathing into it. After a few minutes of this calming practice, my breathing gradually returned to a more regular rhythm, and I continued on my way. I had a hard time concentrating on my work, as thoughts of what Ginger was doing while I was away were constantly tormenting my mind. During the return flight, my anxiety increased to such an extent that I had to go to the toilet twice, clutching a paper bag to calm my nerves. Returning home on Wednesday evening, I tried to appear impassive, but I felt that she had noticed something was wrong. I deliberately avoided her welcoming kiss, limiting myself to a short peck on the cheek. "Is something bothering you, Jack? You were acting strangely even before you left on Monday," she asked. "Maybe it's just pressure because of my new project at work." I mentioned this in the hope of avoiding further conversations about my problems. "In the past, you usually didn't care about work-related issues, but this particular project is of great importance, as it can lead to a significant increase for me." But it was a lie. "Your concern is starting to bother me. Would you like to take some sedatives? They usually bring me relief in stressful moments." "Okay, I'll start with half a pill." I thought they would be more effective and inconspicuous than paperback pills. After swallowing the pill, I waited patiently and gradually felt my composure returning. A wave of relief washed over me, and a sigh escaped my lips. "Do you like this improvement, Jack?" I asked. She nodded approvingly, expressing her gratitude. "Would you like to join me upstairs?" she suggested, informing me that the children were staying with her parents overnight. It was a direct invitation to intimacy, but I hesitated, realizing that I couldn't respond until I got the latest news from a private investigator. Moreover, I doubted if I would ever be able to enter into such intimacy again. "I'm very tired, dear. All I want is to fall asleep," I confessed. She conceded. "Okay, honey." She looked visibly disappointed and worried. It was unclear whether her concern was for my health or my suspicions. I hoped that the private investigator would not find anything untoward, and the whole situation would resolve soon. The next morning, I woke up early and got ready for work, although I didn't sleep well because of anxiety. The effects of the Valium seemed to have weakened, as my nerves were still tense. Before leaving the house, I found her bottle of pills and decided to take a few pills with me, swallowing another half a tablet. I stopped at a night snack bar, where I enjoyed breakfast and drank a cup of decaf coffee, after which I felt ready for the working day. Around 9 o'clock, my impatience got the better of me. I quickly closed the door to my office and dialed Sam's number, trying to uncover the events that unfolded during my absence. "Sam, this is Jack Masters. Could you please inform me about the latest developments related to my wife?" Sam answered without hesitation. "Mr. Masters, I was just about to contact you. Could you visit my office this morning? I can provide you with comprehensive information about what we have found out so far." Determined, I assured Sam. "I can be there in 15 minutes, Sam." Sam confirmed it. "Okay, I'll be waiting for you to arrive." I informed my secretary that I would be away for an hour, and asked her to contact me on my mobile phone if there were any urgent matters. When I got to Sam's office, his secretary invited me in. With a feeling of fear, I stepped into the room. Sam got up from his chair and held out his hand to me. "I suppose you're eager to find out the truth," he said, getting straight to the point. "Your wife is having an extramarital affair," he informed me, horrifying me with his sudden revelation. My worst fears have become reality. I sank into the chair in front of his desk, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over me. It was clear that what I had discovered went beyond a simple affair. She completely immersed herself in a vicious relationship with her lover, voluntarily giving herself to him and others, driven by mania of passion. My heart sank when he placed a series of photographs on the table in front of me, each of which revealed a disturbing truth. Here she is, my wife of 13 years, vulnerable and naked, kneeling in front of him. And here's the final blow, an image of her kneeling surrounded by 2 other men. It became painfully clear why I hadn't seen her naked for what seemed like an eternity. I suddenly felt sick, and I hurriedly left Sam's office, running down the hall in search of a bathroom. There I regretfully emptied the contents of my stomach, including breakfast and something else. After recovering a little, I plucked up the courage and took another pill, after which I returned to Sam's office. When I returned, his sympathetic secretary glanced at me, and then returned to her duties with Sam. Feeling guilty, I said, "Sorry about that." Sam took the initiative to collect the photos and carefully put them in an envelope while I was away. "These are only preliminary data," he explained, "until I receive further instructions from you regarding further actions. In addition, we have a video recording that captures all the events of Tuesday evening. Here," he said, handing me an envelope. "As soon as you are ready to terminate our services, we will prepare a final report for you, as well as a copy for your lawyer. In addition, we found out that this is her boss, John Harding, the vice president of the bank at her workplace." The sedatives helped me keep my composure, allowing me to think more clearly. "Okay, Sam, I'll let you know when I make a decision. Now I need time to sit down and think about my options." "I see. We will be looking forward to your reply." Back at my office, I tried to find solace in introspection. After asking the secretary not to disturb me, I retired to the inner sanctum of my workplace, closing the door behind me. I was weighed down by a decision that could affect our marriage, our family, and the lives of our children. I spent the rest of the day in my office, ignoring the passing hours and neglecting even the thought of lunch. My secretary, as astute as ever, sensed my inner turmoil and unmistakably determined that it stemmed from domestic problems. She checked on me several times, and when my boss found out about my lack of communication, he came downstairs to chat with me. "Jack, I know you have some problems, and if there's anything I can do to help, please feel free to ask. Why don't you take the day off and go home?" Jerry kindly offered. Grateful for his concern and suggestion, I replied, "Thanks, Jerry, but I think I can think better on my own here, but I am very grateful to you." Understanding my position, Jerry nodded and said, "Good. We all wish you all the best." With that, he closed the door and left. I stayed at my desk until the usual time to leave, but by that time I had formulated a plan of action in my mind. On the way home, I decided to take another pill to relax. When I entered our house, I felt a sense of calm. Ginger met me at the door, trying to kiss me lovingly, but I managed to avoid it. Scared, she asked, "What's wrong, Jack?" I replied, "Ginger, we need to have a serious talk. I plan to take the kids to your parents for a while, and we can talk when I get back." Ginger's face turned pale, her eyes filled with fear, but she quietly agreed, saying, "All right, Jack." When I returned, I found Ginger sitting in her usual armchair in the family room. Gathering my resolve, I went over and closed the blinds on the windows. I turned on the light, illuminating the room, and directed my attention to her. "Ginger," I said, "please get up and undress." The shock in her eyes was unmistakable. "What? Are you serious?" "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, seriously, get up and take off your clothes," I ordered in an unyielding tone. A sense of desperation filled her pleas. "Please, Jack, I beg you, don't make me do this, please." Ignoring her pleas, I warned her, "Do as I say, Ginger, or I'll take them off myself by force." Reluctantly, with tears in her eyes, she got up and began the painful process of undressing. When she reached her bra and panties, she hesitated, revealing the painful marks that marred her once flawless body. Ginger stood in front of me, her tear-stained face glistening. She slowly undressed, exposing painful bruises and bite marks on her skin. Overwhelmed with grief, I couldn't help but cry with her. "Oh, Ginger, how could this happen?" I begged, my own tears streaming down my cheeks. She whispered, her voice full of remorse, "Jack, I'm really sorry. Please find the strength in your heart to forgive me. I was helpless." I asked her to take a robe and take cover. We needed to talk, and she had some difficult decisions to make. Trying to control myself, I managed to squeeze out, "Please wipe your tears and come back. We need to talk." When she left the room, I felt my chest constrict again, and my stomach rumbled with worry. To calm my nerves, I took half a sedative. When she reappeared in her bathrobe, I was overcome by a sense of calm. Motioning her to sit down, I handed her an envelope with photographs documenting her indiscretion. With a mixture of anger and sadness, I encouraged her to study each photo. knowing full well what consequences they would have for our families, friends, and the upcoming divorce process. I couldn't believe that among the hurried footsteps, she saw one of the pictures. Her body was shaking with uncontrollable sobs, and her eyes were filled with tears. The weight of guilt weighed on her as she repeated, "Oh my God, oh my God, what have I done? I'm full of regret, I'm so sorry." I desperately wanted her to share the details, but not the terrible ones. I wanted to understand how it all started. I needed to know if there were any other indiscretions, if the children were really mine. And most importantly, I wanted to find out if she still loves me, and if she wants to be with her alleged lover, John Harding. "Jack, I swear I've never cheated on you and I love you," she pleaded, her words full of sincerity. "I want to be with you and our children. I want to assure you that the children are undoubtedly yours. Please trust me and don't reject me. I'm begging you for help because I desperately need you right now. I don't like him at all." My heart was pounding furiously in my chest, primarily from anger. There was a ball of intense rage burning in my stomach, and even the pills couldn't calm it down. "Please tell me the whole story, but remember that if I discover even one lie, it will have consequences." So it all started 6 months ago, when I signed up for a 3-week course to get a position as a bank operator. John Harding was a teacher in the classes that I attended with 3 other women who were also interested in part-time work. At first, I had some difficulty assimilating the concepts he taught, which prompted him to offer additional classes with a tutor after classes, even after the bank closed. I felt very grateful to him for giving me extra time to help me understand the material, which inadvertently led to an unexpected power dynamic between us. Strangely enough, I found myself attracted to this newfound self-control. Eventually, our relationship took a different turn when I started seeing him in the evenings while you were away. Our meetings took place at a motel near the airport, and unfortunately, he began to expect me to cover the cost of the room. I was overwhelmed with guilt. I was ashamed of my actions, and I desperately wanted to put an end to it. But he showed me a terrifying video of us together, capturing the compromising situation I let him put me in. He threatened to share it with you if I didn't comply with his demands. Fortunately, it's all over now. I want to move on, but I really need to understand why I made such a terrible choice. Your help is extremely important, and I deeply apologize for this whole situation. My love for you and our children is immense, and the thought of losing you is unbearable. I hardly understand your actions. They seem incredibly stupid to me. How much longer do you think you could go on without facing the consequences of your actions? Have you ever thought about me and the children during your actions? It seems like you're remorseful more because you were caught than because you're genuinely sorry for the pain you caused us. How can I trust you again when I'm not around? Anyone you meet can become a target for a new affair. Oh, Jack, this is unacceptable. I will never make such a stupid mistake again. Now, it's time for you to make a decision. You have 2 options, and I need an answer by tomorrow morning. Option 1, I will file for divorce and demand full custody of the children. If you don't want to accept full custody and limited visitation rights, I will reluctantly share the private investigator's report, including all the photos with our family and friends exposing your behavior. This will reveal the truth about your infidelity and allow you to freely continue your relationship with your lover. In addition, I am ready to consider the possibility of refusing a divorce, provided that you resign from your position at the bank. You will also have to testify to our lawyer, describing your actions in detail, and agree to certain restrictions on your future activities. Although I doubt it, I'm offering you this option primarily because our children, due to their young age, still need a mother. You are the most suitable candidate, and I assure you that I will not publicly disclose the private investigator's report. Instead, I will keep it as a testament to your future loyalty and respect for me. In addition, I'm asking you to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases. Thank you, my dear, for giving me another opportunity. I promise you won't regret it. But I don't expect an immediate response. Please sleep at night and give me an answer in the morning. For now, you'll sleep in the spare room. Do you understand? I hope you understand the gravity of the situation." The next morning I woke up early after a restless night. As I drifted off to sleep, I began to have disturbing nightmares. In these dreams, I stood on a high balcony and looked down into the bedroom, where Ginger was having an affair with several men. Overcome by a sense of helplessness, I desperately searched for a way to intervene, but suddenly woke up from a cold sweat. My frustration must have been obvious because Ginger knocked on the door twice, worried about my well-being. As she walked down the hall towards our spare room, her sobs could be heard in the distance. Sitting in the kitchen and sipping decaf coffee, I was preparing to go back upstairs to take a shower and get ready for work. At that moment, Ginger entered, breaking the silence. She was wearing an old nightgown and a bathrobe, and it looked like she hadn't slept much. I just stared at her, not acknowledging her presence, until she came up to me and looked up at me. "Jack, I cannot express how deeply I regret, but I will not be able to repeat these words for the rest of my life. Instead, I want to prove my sincerity to you. I am ready to accept your offer and stay with you as a wife. You can set any conditions regarding my further actions, and I will immediately quit my job at the bank. I want to clarify our agreement. I propose to keep the marriage only for convenience. Intimate relationships are not included in our plans, and you will have your own space in a spare room for an indefinite period. In this relationship, I expect you to take on the duties of maid and nurse for our children. You will receive a weekly salary for working as a maid and an allowance for the purchase of groceries and other necessary things for the house. I understand that it is necessary to explain to children our sleep order, and I will come up with an appropriate explanation. Now, if you want, I can make breakfast for you before you leave for the day. I want to clarify that you no longer have the privilege to address me with affectionate words. From now on, address me as Jack. Yes, you can make breakfast for me before I go downstairs." "I get it, Jack." As soon as I arrived at my workplace, I immediately contacted Sam and instructed him to stop all current business related to my case. In addition, I asked about the expected deadline for receiving an exhaustive final report based on its current findings. Sam assured me that he would finish it by noon, since all the necessary information, including the accompanying photos, is already stored on his computer. Immediately after writing the report, he immediately sent a copy to me, and another to my lawyer John Masters, using the courier service. For some obscure reason, which I did not know at the time, I specifically asked him not to mention anything in his report about the video he made during an affair with my wife, but to forward it directly to me. He agreed without hesitation and did not question my intentions, as he had enough evidence from the photographs to confirm the conclusions drawn in the report. Then I contacted John Masters and informed him about the results of Sam's work, informing him that a copy of the report would arrive at his office today. We made an appointment at his office the next day so that he would have time to review the report. "John, I want you to approach the report with the intention of bringing legal action against the bank and John Harding. Ginger will accompany me tomorrow so that you can listen to her story and get her testimony for any possible case that we decide to bring." "Okay, Jack. I'll study the report upon his arrival and be ready to discuss it when you arrive tomorrow." I spent the rest of the day making phone calls to cancel our joint credit cards. During the lunch break, I transferred all our accounts from the bank that Ginger used to work with to a new one, only in my name. In addition, I ordered that our savings be converted into a trust fund for our children, and my father acted as a trustee. As soon as I got home that evening, I brought my copy of the report. After we had dinner and the kids were doing their homework, I joined her in the family room and handed her the report. But I deliberately omitted the mention of the video, because on the way home I stopped by our new bank and put in a safe specifically for storing it. Ginger sobbed uncontrollably as she looked through the carefully collected evidence exposing her infidelity. She struggled to find the words to express her emotions. "I have no words, but I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. If you betray me again, know that I have a safe in which important information is stored," I confessed with a tremor in my voice. Realizing the gravity of their situation, Ginger sympathetically replied, "I understand, Jack. I will comply." He took a deep breath before continuing, "Tomorrow morning at 10, I want you to be present at John Masters' office. Get ready for a detailed account of your affair with John Harding. Besides, I'm begging you to find a reputable psychiatrist. Make an appointment with him as soon as possible. It is very important that we resolve this issue as soon as possible." With a mixture of remorse and determination, Ginger agreed, her voice trembling. "Yes, Jack, I'll come. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to fix it. I want to inform you that today I called the bank to apply for retirement from work. In addition, today I managed to get the contact details of a psychiatrist, but his next appointment is scheduled for next week. Despite the fact that I periodically take Valium to cope with anxiety, my chest is still squeezed and I continue to struggle. I'm starting to feel depressed and overwhelmingly sad. In the evening, I continued to have nightmares, and I realized that in the current situation, I might need to see a psychiatrist. The next day, I decided to take a break from work at 9:45 a.m. to meet with John and Ginger. Ginger, who had her own car, was driving to John's office. I informed my boss about some personal issues that required my attention, and he was sympathetic to this, giving me a day off if necessary. When I arrived at John's office the next morning, I found Ginger waiting for me in the waiting room. We entered together and were warmly greeted by John, who motioned us to take our seats in front of his desk. Having read the private investigator's report, I consider it necessary to talk to Ginger in order to assess the possibility of bringing legal proceedings against the bank, John Harding, and others involved in this case. Ginger, could you share with me your thoughts on the current situation? Ginger looked at me and her face showed surprise. Are you really going to go after John and the bank? I explained. I want to hold John Harding accountable, and I think the bank should be held accountable too, given that the incident occurred in their office. Ginger silently averted her eyes, her body trembling as if she was crying. Tears streamed down her face, and John offered her a box of tissues. When she managed to pull herself together, she continued to tell the same story as me. After she finished, John thought for a moment. I believe that we have grounds to bring a case against the bank, John Harding, and all the others involved, especially if they were employees of the bank, he argued. First, Ginger, I will need your signed testimony. I will tell you about the key points that you should focus on. Then I will hand you over to my secretary, who will decode your story. After that, you will sign the document, which will then be notarized. After that, I will be able to begin the process of handing over the necessary papers to the bank, John Harding, and all unidentified persons. Our goal is to get a judgment in the amount of about $10 million, but it is important to note that they may try to use publicity as leverage. At the same time, they, like us, will strive to avoid any negative publicity. In addition, we will take measures to ensure the dismissal of John Harding and the seizure of all photographs and videos available to him. As soon as Ginger's testimony is successfully completed, I will return to my work duties. When considering the idea of returning home, I hesitated because of my disgust at Ginger's presence. Whenever her name came to mind, an irresistible anger flared up in me, and I couldn't even bear to look at her or be in her company. Thoughts of separation began to occupy me as the best way out of a difficult situation, but I could not ignore the fact that our children deserve a united family. Despite the fact that I was well aware that my mental state was deteriorating due to a combination of rage and depression, I made a solemn commitment to myself to endure. So we continued to live together for the next 2 months. Although the rage subsided, I still experienced bouts of deep sadness, which sometimes brought me into a state of almost complete incapacity. I had to temporarily give up my job as Ginger began her journey to a psychiatrist, which prompted me to also seek professional help. It took another 2 months to choose the right medications, which allowed me to restore a semblance of normal functioning and eventually return to my work duties. I realized that my condition and the strained relationship with their mother had a negative impact on our children, so we continued to live together. Over the course of a year, our situation gradually improved so much that Ginger and I found ourselves in the same bed again, although it took at least a month before we felt ready to resume our intimate relationship. When I tried to have sexual intercourse with her, I found that I was unable to do so. But after consulting with a doctor, I was prescribed Viagra, which allowed us to resume our intimate relationship. Gradually, we managed to establish a more typical dynamic between husband and wife, and I was able to wean myself off Viagra. As a result, our family relations began to return to normal. At the same time, our lawyer, John Masters, filed a lawsuit against the bank and John Harding. In the end, as a result of out-of-court negotiations with the bank, we reached a settlement agreement in the amount of $3 million. Subsequently, John Harding was fired from his position at the bank. After a tumultuous divorce, he faced the consequences. A $500,000 judgment was issued against him, which forced him to start all over again in another state in order to find a new job and fulfill his alimony and child support obligations. Meanwhile, I distributed the funds received from the bank and Harding, making sure that a significant portion was placed in a trust for our children, of which John Masters was appointed manager. Gradually, my dependence on medications to help cope with depression and anxiety decreased, and we decided to seek marital advice from a psychologist. From her psychiatrist, Ginger learned about the underlying reasons for her relationship with John Harding, and got an idea of how to protect herself from falling into a similar situation of submission in the future. Over time, our marriage regained the comfortable dynamics it had before her infidelity, but I became more vigilant about her actions. Ginger decided not to return to work. As we were approaching our 25th wedding anniversary, our eldest son David graduated from college, got married, and gave us a grandson named Eric. Ginger and I shared the joy of becoming devoted grandparents. Sandra, our daughter, was a successful college student, and Michael, our son, was a freshman. Their success made us feel immensely proud. But as our 25th wedding anniversary approached, I noticed subtle changes in Ginger's behavior and daily routine. It was unpleasant for me to think that she could be involved in another affair, especially after so many years that we had lived together. Our intimate life seemed quite satisfactory to me, so I couldn't understand why she had lost her way. Having decided to get to the bottom of the truth, I began to observe her more closely, starting by checking her email. Despite her attempts to hide it, I came across several emails addressed to her from a man named Charles. They expressed his gratitude for the service she had rendered him, as well as insistent requests to meet with him in person to thank him. She was evasive at first, but eventually his insistence made her agree to meet him in a hotel room on the Saturday evening before our anniversary, which was scheduled for the following Monday. The mention of the hotel room and the scheduled meeting time, 6:30 p.m., brought back the familiar discomfort in my old chest. In addition to depression and anger, I began to doubt that she could be unfaithful again. Even though I had already booked a table for our anniversary dinner on Monday evening, it began to feel like a bittersweet farewell to our marriage. Instead of hiring a private investigator, I decided to meet her and her lover right at the hotel. According to this plan, Saturday morning came, and she informed me that she needed to visit a sick friend in the hospital for a few hours in the evening. I tried my best to appear impassive, nodded slightly in confirmation of her information, and then returned my attention to the morning newspaper. The hours passed slowly, and to keep my composure, I rummaged through my things until I found a long-forgotten stash of sedative pills. It was about 6 o'clock when Ginger left, and after waiting patiently for half an hour, I decided to follow her to the hotel. Arriving at the place, I thought about how I could get into the room she occupied. Noticing an old baseball cap and jacket in the trunk of my car, I took them and headed to the hotel. I entered a luxury hotel the elegant atmosphere of which caught my eye as soon as I walked through the doors. Intrigued by the beautiful cut flowers displayed in the lobby, I decided to buy a large bouquet. With fragrant flowers in my hands, I headed for the elevator designed for the 5th floor. When I got to number 524, I prepared for the surprise I had planned. Putting on my cap and jacket, I put the bouquet in front of me and nervously knocked on the door. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my excitement was at its peak. His wife's voice came from behind the door. "Who's there?" Summoning all my courage, I disguised my voice and answered, "Flower delivery, ma'am." Soon the latch on the door opened and my wife looked out. Her curiosity was great. "I didn't order flowers." At that moment, I accidentally dropped the flowers and stormed into the room. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Oh, Jack, you came just in time. There's no one here. I only did it so that you could come here. The kids are having an anniversary dinner for us today, and they wanted to surprise you. Now please put on your suit. It's lying on the bed over there." I remembered walking up to her and checking the bathroom to make sure she was alone. Then I turned to face her, and she was looking at me with a smile on her face. For a moment, my mind became empty, devoid of any thoughts or feelings. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, a wave of anger swept through me, overwhelming all others. I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. She was well aware of the emotional turmoil I went through after her betrayal many years ago. Why would she bring me here, in a similar situation? Just when I was on the verge of venting my rage at her, darkness enveloped me, and I felt myself being pulled into the abyss. Amid the chaos, I faintly heard Ginger's cry for help, calling my name before falling into the void. And so, the next day, I found myself in the sterile walls of the intensive care unit at a local hospital. I had to take a series of tests that morning. Anxiously awaiting the results, I took the opportunity to talk to my son David. Sandra and Michael were at home taking care of their mother. "Dad, Mom is being sedated," David informed me. "She doesn't understand why you're angry with her and why you refuse to see her." I confessed to David, "I'm seriously thinking about divorcing your mother. That's why I need to talk to John Masters." David asked, puzzled, "Why, Dad? What did she do to make you feel this way?" I replied, "Do you have any idea how your mother managed to get me to the hotel?" David shook his head and said, "No. She just mentioned that she would bring you there." Before I go into the narrative, could you explain why your mother became involved in the preparation of the anniversary dinner? She found out about it when Michael accidentally left a folder with hotel prices and other materials that, in fact, revealed our plans. Despite this, we decided to make a surprise. Mom volunteered to ensure your presence in the banquet hall by 7 o'clock, and we assigned this duty to her. All this happened when you were 12 years old, even though you didn't know about it. It was then that I discovered that your mother was involved in a very scandalous affair. After this incident, I experienced a profound mental disorder, as a result of which I could not work and needed several months of therapy. I am grateful to my employer for supporting me through this difficult period until I was able to restore stability. But I must admit that I have never been able to fully forgive your mother for her part in this ordeal. But over time, we managed to restore a sense of comfort and closeness to each other. In the past, I have often succumbed to uncontrollable fits of anger directed at your mother, and there have been times when I doubted the possibility of resuming our relationship. It took me a lot of time and effort to overcome these emotions and heal. In order to lure me here, your mother devised a plan involving a fictional lover whom she intended to meet at the hotel on Saturday evening. Having fallen for her trick, I ran into her and this imaginary lover in their hotel room, and as a result, my long-standing mental anguish surfaced. Perhaps heart problems were added to them. The anger I feel towards her is so strong that if it weren't for the sedative, I could either die or harm her. Given that your mother is a reasonable and rational person, it can be assumed that she must have been aware of the consequences of her actions. I think she was hoping that I would have a heart attack, and she would be left with all our possessions, and there would be no one left alive who could expose her infidelity. Oh my God, Dad, we had no idea about all this. I remember when I was little, you were sick for a long time. Until now, I didn't know the real reason. It's hard to imagine that she could have deliberately acted the way you suggest, but it's also hard to understand how she could have ignored your previous problems. If I decide to divorce, I intend to reveal the whole truth so that the whole world will know about it. I'm going to give your mother a few days to explain why she tried to get me to that hotel room that way. She could have used other methods to achieve the same goal. Dad, I sincerely hope that you can avoid a divorce. I urge you to think about this situation rationally. Ultimately, my decision will depend on the reasonableness of your mother's explanation. Later that day, the cardiologist arrived at the intensive care unit where my son Michael and I were staying. Mr. Carter, I have good news. Your heart is in good condition. We can put you in an ordinary room for the night, after which you can return home tomorrow. It looks like you experienced a shock, as a result of which you lost consciousness. There is evidence of mental stress in your medical record, and it would be advisable for you to seek psychiatric help to identify the root cause of your problem. If you continue to experience this stress, it can lead to potential heart problems. Thank you, doctor. In my situation, returning home is bittersweet, because the root of my problem lies there too. Well, you will have to resolve this issue, perhaps with the help of marital counseling. I personally have already faced a similar situation, but nothing has worked out. Then, in my professional opinion, you are physically capable of leaving the hospital. You should find a way to prevent the recurrence of the problem that caused your problems. I appreciate your help, doctor. As soon as the doctor left, I turned to Michael and asked if David had managed to contact John Masters. Oh, I completely forgot to tell you, Dad. Mr. Masters will meet with you as soon as you can. I'll contact John right away and try to make an appointment with him tomorrow morning after I'm discharged from the hospital. Reaching for the phone, I said, I managed to arrange a meeting with John for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Shortly after that, a nurse came to prepare me for transfer from the intensive care unit. The next morning, David drove me to John Masters' office, where we entered into negotiations with him. When we exchanged greetings, he said, I've heard that some of your old problems have resurfaced, Jack. I confirmed his words by replying yes, and now I have to take action to resolve them. I was hoping that the previous episode was over. But recently she did something that made me think about past problems, and I can't help but wonder if it wasn't done intentionally. Then I explained to him what had happened, which led to the problems I am currently facing. So Jack, what do you think we should do? He asked. I would like you to initiate divorce proceedings based on adultery, I replied. Adultery? He asked again. Do you have any new evidence that she had another affair? No, I replied. I want to pursue a case based on an affair she had 13 years ago. He expressed his concern and said, I'm not sure the judge would agree with that, Jack. You've lived with Ginger for 13 years, and from the point of view of an outsider, it looks like a happy marriage. It is likely that the court will reject the divorce petition due to insufficient evidence that contradicts it. But personally, I don't care about his decision. My intention is to ensure that her infidelity is reflected in public opinion, and to expose the shameful details of her affair. If this attempt fails, we can get a divorce or separation on alternative grounds, but my main goal is to cause her emotional pain. Although I chose to keep silent about her previous infidelity 13 years ago, taking into account the children's need for a mother and a stable family, now I want to unconditionally disclose all the details of her misconduct. The pain she suffered was short-lived, while I went through years of suffering before I was able to regain a semblance of a normal life. But now she has reappeared and brought back all the pain. I feel a strong desire to make her suffer for what she has done, both in relation to her recent actions and in relation to her novel. Our children are already old enough that custody of them is no longer a question, and they can bear the truth about her affair without traumatizing them. But I have to warn you, Jack, that seeking justice in this way can be financially burdensome. Are you sure you want to go down this path? Without a doubt, I'm sure. Despite this, I'm going home to meet Ginger. If she cannot provide a convincing explanation for her recent behavior, I will be forced to take action. I am ready to listen to what she has to say, although I cannot find an excuse for her actions. Unless you hear otherwise from me, please proceed with the divorce, given her previous infidelity. All right, Jack. I will follow your instructions. Thank you, John. After leaving John's office, we returned home to meet Ginger. Sandra and Michael met us on the street, and the whole group of us entered the house. Ginger was already waiting for us in the living room. Watching her upset look, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction that she was finally in a little pain. While I was instructing the children to take their seats, I entered into conversation with her, trying to keep a safe distance. "Greetings, Ginger," I said, settling into the chair opposite her. Trying to keep my composure and detachment, I said, "Hi, Jack." Tears cascaded down her face as she continued, "David enlightened me about your anger at me and what you expect me to say." Regret filled my voice. "I want you to give me a logical explanation for your actions." I should have been prudent, but alas, I did not. Foolishly, I thought it was a simple joke that we could laugh about later. "I sincerely apologize to you, because I deeply regret that I could not show proper judgment. I had no idea what consequences my actions would lead to, especially in relation to you, which could be life-threatening. I can't help but wonder if this was done intentionally with the expectation of such an outcome. Please, Jack, I beg you not to say or believe such things. I truly love you and imagined a future in which we would grow old together. It is unpleasant and painful for me to see that my actions have made you doubt my love for you. I understand your intentions because, apparently, this is a way to keep the confidentiality of your past affair in the event of my absence, as well as to give you exclusive control over our marital property. Potentially, this will allow you to freely realize your unconventional desires without feeling any remorse. But Jack, I beg you not to accuse me of such motives, especially in front of our children. I have no desire to engage in debauchery again, and I'm not looking for any additional financial gain. And although I hope that the news of my affair will never come out, I will never harm you to keep it a secret. Now that our children have reached the age of understanding, it is very important that they know about our past mistakes and learn from them to avoid repeating them in their own lives. But it's getting harder for me to keep living in anxiety, constantly worrying that you might have another affair. It is depressing to realize that I, as the innocent party in all this, bear the brunt of the pain caused by your actions. Perhaps my desire to end this may seem like a thirst for revenge, but for me, it is a necessary step. What strikes me deeply is how easily you ignored the difficulties I went through after your affair, and the months and years of therapy it took me to overcome this pain. I was hoping that you had sufficient intelligence to understand the possible consequences of repeating this information, so I suspect that you deliberately planned this. Your attempts to convince me that it was an accident were unsuccessful, and as a result, I am instructing John Masters to begin divorce proceedings on the grounds of adultery. It is advisable that you contact a lawyer. Adultery? Jack, I haven't dated anyone else since my affair. I made a promise to be faithful to you, and I kept it. But I intend to substantiate my accusation of adultery with your last affair 13 years ago. Please, Jack, I beg you not to go down this path. If you want a divorce, I'm ready to give it to you on any terms except one. Please don't base it on what happened 13 years ago. It would be a disaster for me if this information became public. I'm sorry, Ginger, but this is the decision I've come to. I want you to experience real pain. Please have your lawyer contact John Masters. I'll pack my things and check into a motel until I find an apartment. As soon as I'm settled in, I'll come back to pick up the rest of my stuff. Before I leave, I would like to know if there is anything to say about this to our children." I drew attention to each of them by asking a question. "I want to say something that I think will sum up our thoughts. Dad, it bothers me that you're seeking revenge by basing the divorce on an incident that happened 13 years ago. Mom, I can't understand how you could accidentally make such a stupid mistake. Anyway, we all wanted this situation to never happen. I will forever regret trying to arrange a wedding anniversary dinner for you. It pains me to think that one of us played a role in your breakup. Perhaps when the chaos settles down, both of you will be able to find a way to reconciliation," David said. "Your efforts were commendable and appropriate to the situation. Children, please don't blame yourself for what happened. It could have happened at another time. And now I'm going upstairs to pack my things." While I was getting up, Ginger was sitting and crying silently, and our children were trying to comfort her. After that, I drove my car to a motel near my place of work, where I intended to stay for only a week until I found a more permanent place to live. The confrontation was over, and it seemed that after 25 years of a crumbling marriage, the end was coming. After my encounter with Ginger, I wasted no time renting a furnished apartment near my place of work. I quickly checked in and began to collect the remaining personal belongings from our old house, transferring them to a new living space. During this process, Ginger continued to be in the kitchen, although we did not communicate with her. She seemed to radiate deep fatigue as she sat in silence. Exactly a week after my departure, John took the initiative and filed for divorce in court, setting a date for the hearing. An official announcement was published in the local newspaper, which attracted the attention of our friends, who had no idea about our separation. As a result, our house was flooded with phone calls from concerned people who wanted to know what was going on. Ginger, in response, seemed to spend countless hours in tears and actively avoided answering calls. Strangely, I couldn't help feeling guilty, knowing that she was experiencing some kind of mental anguish. In the end, during the divorce process, the judge granted my request for divorce on the grounds of adultery. This decision infuriated our children, and they stopped communicating with me for the next 2 years. After quickly selling her house, she decided to move into a condominium. It was rumored that she rarely went outside and became somewhat of a recluse. She refrained from dating and hardly talked to our mutual friends. Her parents and our children were the only ones with whom she maintained regular contact, which in fact constituted her only connection with the outside world. As for me, it meant the end of a tumultuous chapter in my life. Despite the fact that I lacked companionship in my marriage, I found solace in my current state. But I often wonder if I went too far in hurting her. And even if that's the case, I'm sure she deserves it. Alone at home, I was overwhelmed by a wave of self-pity when I could hardly bear the forced inaction. It became clear that I needed to shift my attention from trying to get my job back to restoring my damaged reputation. Just 6 weeks ago, I held the respected position of project manager. I used to compare my role to the work of a juggler who constantly maneuvers 500 balls in the air and makes sure that they all descend at the same time. Finally, after 2 decades of hard work, I have the opportunity to engage in significant projects and receive substantial financial rewards. Given the burden of paying college tuition for our children and my wife's lavish lifestyle, having extra money would be helpful if I wanted to stay out of work until old age. Unfortunately, there was not enough money in our bank account, and without a new source of income, our situation became deplorable. I couldn't help but feel sorry for myself. The previous project was completely failed due to the collapse of the main contracting company. In an attempt to prevent such an outcome, I provided a friend who still worked for this company with the minutes of a board meeting at which I successfully convinced them not to hire the lowest bidder. But my advice was ignored. The board of directors must have put pressure on the secretary responsible for drafting the protocols to get rid of the extra people, putting him in front of a choice between me and them. I found myself at home alone, while Sandra, my wife, with whom I have lived for 2 decades, went to visit her sister for the 5th Friday in a row. Although she invited me to accompany her, I refused as usual. After all, why should I help her sister plan her 15th wedding anniversary? Although my sister was quite pleasant, I just couldn't stand her husband, an arrogant jerk. He was the proud owner of a compact but thriving manufacturing company, which he founded on his wife's inheritance. To be honest, if he boasted once again that his current value was $12 million, I couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't lose my temper with this vain man. My peaceful retreat ended at exactly 10 minutes past 9 in the evening when the doorbell rang. After drinking 3 glasses of bourbon, I felt a little drunk as I stumbled towards the door to open it. To my surprise, my wife stood in front of me, looking as energetic and young as she had 10 years ago. A smile played on my face when I realized that it was Linda, Sandra's younger sister. It was becoming increasingly obvious that she had changed. Now she was a little shorter, extremely attractive, and with noticeably enlarged breasts. I invited her into the house and asked if she wanted coffee or tea. We had a casual conversation for a while. "Well, what's new, Linda?" I asked curiously. Linda looked a little puzzled, and I realized that Sandra should have been with her, planning their anniversary at her house with Neil. Linda clarified the situation. "Our anniversary was 4 weeks ago, Dave." Now it's my turn to be confused. I realized that bourbon, although pleasant, did not add clarity to my mind. Instead of embarrassing myself, I chose to remain silent. Linda seemed preoccupied with something. "I understand that you prefer that Neil and I don't say anything, and I understand that you may feel a little awkward. But still, I wanted to express my personal gratitude for the generous and caring gift that you and Sandra gave us. It really surpasses anything I could have imagined, and we are incredibly grateful." If at first my thoughts could be called somewhat shocked, now I was completely confused. "What exactly do you mean, Linda?" "Well, if you want to play denial, I'm ready to play along. I don't know exactly what Sandra told you. Damn, this is a little awkward." She paused to calm down, clearly not expecting my reaction. "I know Sandra told you that I'm frigid. I've never liked sex. Of course, once a week if necessary, I still fulfill my marital duty to Neil, but I hate doing this." In this regard, Neil began to claim that the romance had gone out of our marriage, and he was probably right. We haven't spent time together for a long time. Besides, we couldn't have children. Honestly, it's amazing that our relationship has lasted so long. That's why Neil and I are incredibly grateful for the gift that you and Sandra gave us. I just wanted to express my gratitude to you personally. I admire your strong marriage, Dave. Trusting Sandra to such an extent must be evidence of your connection. I'm not sure if she noticed my shocked expression, but even if she did, it didn't stop her from giving me a light kiss on the lips. "Thanks, Dave. You really are a gem." "I'm confused, Linda. Where is Sandra?" "She's walking with Neil." My sudden outburst of anger must have finally caught the attention of my smiling sister-in-law. "Let me repeat, Linda. What the hell is going on here?" "Well, Sandra said that it was your proposal, a joint wedding anniversary gift from both of you. 10 dates with Neil in 10 weeks. Neil gets 10 weeks of romance, and I get 10 weeks off from unwanted advances. Sandra mentioned that you agreed to this plan, believing that it would bring a revival to our fading intimate life. The idea was that knowing that she was on a date with another man would ignite your competitive nature. According to her, you've been having a good time with her in the bedroom for the last 4 weeks. She paused. A puzzled expression must have appeared on my face, because Linda immediately noticed that something was clearly wrong. Eventually, I regained my composure and whispered, "Sandra and I haven't been intimate for over 6 weeks. Are you saying she's on a date right now? Damn, so while we're having this conversation, they can already book a motel room? No, silly, I always insist that they come back to our house for intimacy." "What? Are you saying they've already done it?" "Yes, they entered into an intimate relationship after the first date." "Dave, you probably knew that was the way it was done, right? Please confirm my assumption." It is often said that photography speaks volumes. In this particular case, my frustration led to the fact that I forcefully punched through the plasterboard wall closest to me. Linda was taken aback, but quickly regained her composure while I calmed my injured hand. "Dave, it's unbelievable that Sandra is cheating on you with Neil. You really didn't know about this, did you?" Suddenly, her gaze turned stern. "We must put an end to her actions." But I had already anticipated her thoughts and was one step ahead. I urgently pressed the speed dial button on my phone, hoping for a quick response. Finally, on the 6th ring, Sandra picked up the phone, out of breath. "You liar! Come home immediately so we can sort this out," I exclaimed. "Linda brought me up to date on all your recent cases." "I'm really sorry, Dave. I can't go home right now. I have things to do," Sandra replied, her voice strained. "Yes, you are in the process of destroying our marriage," I replied. "Ever since the kids moved in, you've been insisting on having an affair." Well, let me clarify once again. The answer was no, then, and it remains the same categorical no now. Finding an embellished excuse to justify something does not make it morally acceptable. I'm sorry, Dave, for revealing this information in this way, but I made a promise to Neil and Linda, and you always stressed how important it is to keep your word. In 5 weeks, everything will be settled, and we will be able to return to our usual way of life. If there is a problem, I can ask them to release me from my obligations, but this decision will remain with them. I can't understand it, but damn it, go home immediately. No, Dave, a promise is a promise. I am not in your power, and I have the freedom to make my own choices. Our conversation ends here. Hurry up, Linda. We need to go to your house. I need to put an end to this situation. You're driving because I've drunk alcohol over the legal limit. When we arrived, the house was deserted, and traces of a hasty departure were scattered everywhere. Linda looked as crestfallen as I did. I have a plan. I will contact Neil and inform him of her intentions. If he finds out that you don't approve of him, he'll probably reconsider his actions. Their phones ignored incoming calls for the next few hours, and I got home around 2 in the morning. Linda, like me, felt completely devastated because of her part in my betrayal. I believed her when she promised to tell her husband that he did not have my permission to have a relationship with my wife, and to inform him that her alleged consent was no longer valid. The agreement they had made has now been annulled. By Sunday afternoon, neither Linda nor I had received any messages from our spouses. Similarly, they did not answer their cell phone calls. I had plenty of time to think about everything, considering that it was impossible to sleep. I wondered where our marriage went wrong. As far as I knew, our relationship was normal and healthy, and there were no signs that it had gone off the rails. But on Sunday afternoon, I realized that sitting at home like an idol, I feel helpless. Realizing this, I packed a few bags and moved to a motel. It wasn't until Monday afternoon that Linda finally got in touch and reported that Neil had returned the previous night. I asked him where he was, and he admitted that after you called Sandra on Friday night, they moved into a motel. Dave, Neil overheard the whole conversation when you called. He already knew that you weren't involved in this plan. I asked him about his motives, and he stated that Sandra was distraught and started crying. He called me insignificant and said he couldn't miss the opportunity to be with someone like Sandra. Dave, those words were incredibly hurtful, but I managed to get him to promise not to see Sandra again. I recorded the entire conversation on my phone as proof if you doubt my story. Linda, I completely trust your words. By the way, I advise you to save the recording as it may be useful in the future. Today, I also visited Sandra, and unfortunately, she was just as terrible. She had the audacity to hint that if I were a decent woman, I could control my husband. This woman has always been relentless in her attacks on me. I asked if she had talked to you, but she replied that she would wait until you calmed down after your outburst and returned home yourself. Dave, she's just trying to trick you. I feel incredibly upset and humiliated, not knowing what steps to take next. Please refrain from immediate action, Linda. I have an appointment with my lawyer tomorrow. Perhaps after that everything will be clarified, I must say that the situation is quite depressing." The lawyer's consultation left a depressing impression. Sandra is entitled to half of our property, but towards the end, there was a glimmer of hope. At first, his words caused confusion, but he explained that he rarely had to observe a situation where a man had a stronger position than mine, unless he resorted to creating explicit videos to intimidate his wife. Curiously, he asked about the status of Sandra's parents and whether she had anything to do with the church, casting a subtle glance of intrigue in my direction. On Wednesday, I sneaked into my former home and discreetly installed surveillance cameras in the bedroom and living room. These cameras were designed to transfer the footage to a hidden hard drive securely located in the basement. As an expert from the store advised, I needed to change the batteries and hard drive every 4 to 5 days, considering their use. In the late afternoon, Sandra finally found the time and sent me a message, asking when I would arrive home. In response, I informed her that I would be away for a couple of weeks due to leaving town. Increasing the chances of catching a mouse largely depends on how the mouse perceives the absence of a cat. Similarly, I began to feel that Sandra was no longer putting our marriage at the forefront, and came to realize that I no longer wanted him either. Throughout this period, I kept in touch with Linda. On Friday evening, she contacted me to tell me that Neil had not returned home. I volunteered to invite her, and we decided to have dinner together. It is said that in difficult times, people seek solace in the company of other people. Surprisingly, we managed to distract ourselves and have a lot of fun. During the return trip, I told Linda about the surveillance cameras I had installed. I asked her to solemnly promise not to tell anyone about this. After asking her hypothetical reaction after discovering Neil's infidelity, I received a dispassionate response. Realizing that simply showing Linda evidence of Neil's infidelity could make her become more determined and think about divorce, I considered this the only alternative to revenge in the form of a physical attack on him. Therefore, on my way home, I drove past my house and, unsurprisingly, noticed his car parked at the entrance. Linda cried the whole way back and hurried into the house as soon as we arrived. I followed her and entered the house too. I gently put her to bed, comforting and reassuring her until the tears subsided and she fell asleep. While waiting for Monday when I could safely receive the videotape, I received an unexpected call from Linda on Saturday evening. She expressed a desire to go on a date with me again, intending to make Neil jealous. Considering that I had nothing to lose, I agreed to her proposal. After a delicious dinner, we indulged in dancing and got great pleasure from communicating with each other. When the clock struck 1:30 a.m., I took Linda to her house, but on the way, she was overcome by a feeling of anxiety. She was afraid that Neil might take advantage of her absence to secretly return to Sandra. His car was parked outside their house. At 9 o'clock on Monday morning, I sneaked into my former home and replaced the hard drive and batteries. Since I didn't have any work commitments, I had the whole day to watch them. When the clock struck noon, I finally plucked up the courage and told the truth. So far, all this has been just speculation, but at that moment, the evidence was undeniable and staring me in the face. I involuntarily closed my eyes when the image of them entering the bedroom appeared on the screen. Then it dawned on me that the location of the camera was not the most successful. The camera only captured their upper body parts, but the sound was clear. I opened my eyes earlier than I expected and vaguely heard him moaning as he reached the peak. When I looked at the screen, they were already lying next to each other, deep in conversation. I listened for a while, and then eagerly dialed Linda's number and invited her to my motel. Linda arrived 20 minutes later. "You should be a witness to this, Linda," I exclaimed. She took out a bottle of wine from the minibar, and I turned on my laptop and started playing the recording. I turned on Sandra and Neil's conversation when they started chatting after an intimate moment. "Neil, when are you planning to notify my sister of the divorce? It would be great if we could arrange a wedding in the coming spring. I have already instructed my lawyer to begin the necessary legal actions on Monday, so that your sister will receive a summons on Tuesday or Wednesday. I prefer not to delay this process. If she somehow manages to gather evidence sooner, it will mean that I have not fulfilled the terms of our prenuptial agreement. Can you sympathize with the unfortunate situation my sister is in? Personally, I've tolerated her emotionally detached demeanor for a long time. Sandra gave an unusual grin, but remained silent, listening. The question hung in the air, addressed to her. What about you, Sandra? Do you have any feelings for Dave? Sandra regretted asking that question. Reluctantly, she admitted, yes, there is. He was a wonderful husband and father, and our closeness was always satisfying. But it's time for a change. He has not achieved his goals, while you, my dear, have achieved great success. Linda, overcome with despair, said, forget about him. Forget about both of them. I hugged her, preventing her from pouring another glass of wine. She sobbed uncontrollably for what seemed like an eternity. I sympathized with her pain, as I had experienced it myself only 10 days before. Eventually, the sobbing subsided, and she regained her composure. Linda, I began cautiously, what exactly did Neil mean by the prenuptial agreement? Have you seen its contents? Her voice trembled as she explained, this is Dad's attempt to protect my inheritance. If Neil ever gets lost, I'll get everything. I think we have a copy of it at home. The sudden realization hit me, and I couldn't help but express my amazement. Linda, do you understand what this is going to lead to? Dave, did you hear that? This means that in the coming days, he plans to legally separate from us due to irreconcilable differences. Therefore, he will be entitled to half of your house, bank accounts, and company. By the way, how much money do you have in your bank account right now? As far as I remember, about $2 million. Oh, that's a lot. Linda, how determined are you to take revenge and make his life miserable? I want to do everything in my power to make him suffer, Dave. Any suggestions on what actions we should take? Well, it looks like if we counter his claims with a claim of adultery, we can use my video as evidence. Linda, think about this scenario. You will become a wealthy divorced woman with a solid fortune in the bank, an elegant residence and ownership of a company worth $12 million. Do you like it, Linda? Linda laughed heartily, her smile surpassing that of an experienced car salesman. My dear, will you marry me? Given our long experience of communication, she saw the humor in my remark and burst out laughing again. We hugged once more before the atmosphere turned into a more serious one. Linda asked, are you absolutely convinced that the video is of satisfactory quality? Have you watched it in full? Admitting that I closed my eyes during tense moments, Linda decided that we should watch the movie together. She reached out and took my hand, offering her support. But the scenes unfolding on the screen turned out to be a complete disappointment. My beloved wife and Neil undressed without any anticipation, and quickly and dispassionately engaged in intimacy. The clarity of the video was enough to see the discomfort on her face. I was stunned when, a minute and a half later, she even glanced at the clock behind Neil's back. Stunned by what I had just witnessed, I paused the video and turned to Linda in search of answers. Does Neil usually behave like this? I can assume that you were inexperienced before the wedding. Am I right? Of course, Dave. Although I understand that this may be intrusive, I still want to ask. Linda, what size is Neil's, his private part? She gestured at the distance between her thumb and forefinger. No, I mean when it's functioning. That's exactly what I meant. I couldn't help but laugh. I think I've found a solution to another one of your problems. Given the lack of foreplay, the technique used, and the size of the instrument used, it's understandable why you don't find pleasure in making love. Linda, I don't think you're frigid in any way. It would be great if you visited a doctor and had a checkup. I stood up and hugged her, whispering in her ear. Let's see what Dr. Dave can find. Linda moaned after 30 seconds, even though I kept kissing her neck. They did not stop until 45 minutes had passed, after which the high-pitched screams began. Exhausted but satisfied, she sank into a peaceful doze, and I quietly left the room to bring lunch for both of us. When I returned, Linda came out of the shower with a worried expression on her face, but her fears quickly disappeared when I passionately hugged her and plunged into a long and deep kiss. This time I resisted the urge to give in to her hands reaching for my head, and chose to make love to her in a proper manner. I do not pretend to possess the talents of a Casanova decorated with extraordinary skill, but she was satisfied, without making any complaints. We devoted the rest of the day and the whole evening to passionate kisses, gentle caresses, and fascinating conversations. The next day, Linda made an urgent appointment with her lawyer. Armed with my videos and 2 statements, he began drafting the necessary legal documents. That day and all evening, Linda and I had fun playing Scrabble. Honestly, friends, what did you expect? Linda was responsible for completing the tasks. I realized that some positions just don't suit her. Despite all my efforts, I couldn't drown out her screams, even by pressing a pillow to my ears. Our phones buzzed incessantly for the second night in a row, but we didn't pay attention to them. On Wednesday morning, Linda contacted Neil and informed him that she would be at home all day. Then, at exactly 3:15 p.m., there was a decisive knock on the door. When I opened it, my gaze fell on a well-dressed young man. "Please come in. We have been waiting for your arrival," I greeted him warmly. "Linda is busy in the bathroom right now. Would you like to have some coffee?" With a slight surprise, he hesitated before entering the room. I exclaimed, drawing her attention. A court messenger arrived, delivering the long-awaited divorce papers to her. While we waited together, the conversation flowed easily and naturally, demonstrating Phil's friendly nature. Engrossed in our conversation, we were interrupted by the appearance of Linda, who embodies the quintessential feminine essence. She came over to Phil with alacrity. "It's me, Linda Winters, and you have exactly what I was looking for." Once Phil had completed his official duties, we resumed our fascinating conversation, delving into various topics. As it turned out, the job was not the best, but the remuneration was satisfactory. He politely declined another cup and expressed gratitude for the peculiar experience. Surprisingly, it turned out to be quite pleasant. Linda decided to take one of his business cards. Trying to stifle our laughter, we left the unopened envelope on the table and headed back to the motel. Later in the evening, I waited for Sandra to come home from work. In the meantime, I took the opportunity to replace the hard drive and batteries. I interrupted her pathetic apologies, putting an end to them, and quickly moved on to showing carefully edited moments of her home video. As soon as I hinted that she should be very generous in handing me the divorce papers so that the video wouldn't go viral, she burst into a fit of rage. She quickly kicked me out of her own house. Her carefully thought-out scheme collapsed with a deafening crash. The next day, Linda, me, and our newfound companion Phil were looking forward to Neil's return home. Phil seemed to enjoy the situation as much as we did. I stayed late while Neil packed his things. I was constantly caught between him and Linda. I was looking forward to his next move, and he knew it. After 65 minutes, it disappeared, and another 35 minutes passed before all the locks were replaced. By this time, the bank and business accounts had been frozen. When Sandra called me at 9 p.m., I felt a little embarrassed by her friendly tone. She expressed a desire to personally apologize for the terrible way she ruined our marriage. She asked if I could visit her house to accept her apology, for the good old days, and so I reluctantly returned home. I knocked on the door but got no answer. Curiosity made me try the handle, and to my surprise, it turned out to be unlocked. As I walked up the stairs, Sandra's passionate screams echoed through the house. Intrigued, I headed to our bedroom and peeked inside unnoticed. Strangely, instead of feeling jealous or angry, I realized that the only emotion present in me was contempt. A moment later, Sandra pretended to be surprised to notice my presence. "You're not going to miss this, are you, Dave?" she teased. Undeterred, I assured her that there was no need to worry about me, as I had found a real-life partner who could fulfill all my desires. "Don't worry, dear," I replied calmly. "Thanks to personal growth and self-improvement, your sister has become much better." Ignoring the insulting remarks and objects thrown in my direction, I hurriedly left, puzzled by the meaning of all this. The next day, my first duty in my new position was to dismiss my predecessor. Linda has been the registered owner of the company since her financial involvement. Neil should have known about the strict ethical rules of our company, but despite this, he continued to commit his rash acts. Not having sufficient knowledge of production procedures, I devoted the whole morning to talking with experienced employees and appointing an interim manager. Fortunately, I received their unwavering support. Like people who suffer from feelings of inadequacy, Neil was far from the most pleasant person. Just as I was finishing work, I discovered that I had been detained. It seemed like I was being accused of assaulting Sandra Brown and Neil Winters. Despite the awkwardness, I couldn't help but appreciate the cleverness of this explanation of the events of the previous night. It was quite humiliating when you were looked at the police station as a person who had harmed his wife. Using almost all my savings, I secured bail on the same day. I couldn't help feeling a little surprised that Sandra hadn't emptied my bank account yet. The next day, I received a restraining order that forbade me from approaching Sandra, Neil, and our previous place of residence. This ban will be in effect for 6 months. While the lawyers were dealing with their legal issues, I decided to move in with Linda. Our physical intimacy was incredibly intense and exciting, as Linda seemed eager to make up for lost time. Despite the deep sense of guilt over the affair, I kept my lips shut and resigned myself to shame. We didn't pay attention to what our former partners were doing now, although we had heard rumors that they were no longer together. Sandra's tolerance for her partner's behavior seemed to depend on his financial situation. She could put up with his indiscretion if he was rich, but not if he was poor. 3 months later, Linda's divorce became known to everyone, and she became the first among their acquaintances. Neil did not try to dispute the divorce, but he strongly denied the accusations of infidelity. He argued that since Sandra's involvement was consensual, it did not constitute treason. Both Sandra and Neil testified in support of this claim. But I, on the contrary, testified in Linda's favor, claiming that we both called on them to stop their actions when we learned about the situation. Linda's revelation thrilled me with her courage. It was a moment that filled me with great pride. With unshakable confidence, she fearlessly recounted her experience, revealing the truth about her perceived vulnerability caused by Neil's exceptionally inadequate tools and his inept selfie skills. As expected, the media eagerly picked up on the scandalous nature of the situation, enjoying the sensational headlines. But in fact, everything changed thanks to the brave act of Linda, who recorded on video how she begged Neil to end their affair, which effectively deprived him of power and led to the rejection of his petition. Neil, his honesty and sense of masculinity were destroyed, and he left town. Subsequently, Neil and Sandra disappeared from our lives for 3 months. During the assault trial, Sandra, who was sitting on the witness stand, grinned ominously at me. With great conviction, she shed tears as she talked about the moment I caught her in bed with Neil. Although she admitted she was wrong, she strongly maintained that she did not deserve the physical abuse she was subjected to. At the end of her speech, when I applauded her, the judge scolded me severely. Neil's attempt to defend himself was inconclusive, as he admitted that he was unable to withstand my formidable presence and anger when he found him with my wife. This time, however, I showed due respect to the judge by refraining from clapping my hands. When my lawyer presented the recording of a hidden camera in the living room as evidence, the prosecutor tried to object, pointing out that this recording was not attached to the case during the disclosure process. He immediately apologized to the judge, explaining that the hard drive with the recording became available only yesterday. Since the restraining order was still in effect, the situation did not change. but without knowing Linda, who lifted the ban 2 days after my arrest. I watched Sandra and Neil, and their expressions reflected the drama unfolding on the screen. This time, I successfully positioned the camera in the right place. The screen clearly demonstrated their condescending behavior at the kitchen table after I left. Although they were smart enough to remove the camera from the bedroom, I still did not understand whether they had lost sight of the fact that they were looking for another one, or simply could not find it. In the hushed courtroom, Neil and Sandra had a protracted argument until Neil quickly secured a towel around his arm and forcefully knocked Sandra to the floor. Sandra quickly recovered and prepared for the next round. In response, she hit Neil with a frying pan, enjoying her counterattack. "You should have thought twice before you started this, Neil," she scoffed. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak when a collective sigh swept through the courtroom. Amid this chaos, I strained to hear the verdict of the judge in my case, but witnessed an unexpected turn of events. The judge angrily ordered the bailiff to detain them. It became obvious that the judges treat two specific offenses with contempt. Contempt of court and perjury are serious offenses. Judges make great efforts to achieve their position, and these criminals undermine the integrity of the court, in fact demonstrating their disrespect for it. Although I had the opportunity to release the video and bring charges of conspiracy to obstruct justice or perjury, I decided not to do so. Linda and I both felt that their cruel and arrogant behavior towards us deserved a more decisive reaction. When I finally managed to prove my innocence to the journalists waiting for me, the police chief came up to me and wanted to talk to me. After apologizing for my wrongful arrest, we had a short conversation, during which I quickly forgave him. As soon as our conversation ended, Sandra was released, but she approached Linda with obvious hostility. Trying to protect my current partner from harm, I stepped between them. I turned to Sandra with a plea, asking if she would beat a pregnant woman. Sandra froze, looking dumbfounded, and then her face changed, taking on various shades of intense anger. In the end, she looked away, hiding her tears from us. 2 months later, I came across an article in the newspaper saying that the once happy couple had received a minimum sentence of 12 months in prison for perjury. At that moment, I realized that it was time to start the divorce process and put our house up for sale. Sandra's words struck a chord with me, awakening a fierce sense of competition in me. But this newfound drive was not caused by a desire to regain the partner's favor through physical intimacy, but by a much darker impulse, a thirst for destruction and revenge. 2 nights later, when sweat soaked my body, Linda and I were drawn into another never-ending intimacy. We continued our intense meetings in the bedroom, while Linda expressed a desire to make up for the 15 years of pleasure she felt she had missed. But according to my calculations, she was actually owed only 8 years. Despite this, she firmly believed that there should be at least 12. As I lay next to her, gently stroking her noticeably swollen belly, a conversation began between us. "Isn't that stupid, my love?" I was thinking out loud. If they had done the right thing and divorced before reconciling, our lives would be very different today. I couldn't help but imagine the devastation we would face in this scenario. In an alternate reality, they could gain absolute freedom, wealth, and indulge in endless intimate relationships. Neil seems to have an unwavering determination when it comes to fulfilling such desires. Linda and I enjoyed every moment of our life together and dreamed of a big and happy family. John opened the door and saw his friend Eric standing on the threshold, tears streaming down his face. John, worried, invited him inside, noticing that it was raining outside. They were sitting in John's cozy living room when John's wife, Kelly, entered the room. Sensing the gravity of the situation, Kelly politely offered them privacy. John nodded gratefully, and Kelly left the room, leaving him alone with Eric. John looked at Eric, his eyes filled with sympathy, silently urging him to share his problems. "Eric, something is clearly bothering you. If you open up to me, maybe I can help you, John said softly. Eric nodded, his voice trembling. Yes, I need your help. That's why I came here. I want you to help me regain my self-esteem. John asked in disbelief. What do you mean, Eric? Could you explain in more detail? Eric took a deep breath before continuing. I haven't felt like a man in the last 3 years. I was a cuckold, John. My wife, Lisa, had an affair with another man. The word cuckold struck a chord with John, but he asked for clarification. I know this word, but could you clarify? Are you saying that Lisa has been unfaithful to you for 3 years? Eric nodded decisively. Not with several men, but only with one. She was dating Mark behind my back, and I was in the loop the whole time. Shocked, John demanded details. Mark? Has he been dating your wife for 3 years? Eric confirmed. There was disbelief in his voice. Yes, John. And at first I allowed it. It was my fantasy to see Lisa with another man, but everything got out of control. She kept inviting him over and he mocked me, saying he understood why she wanted him. I felt powerless to influence the situation. John's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. So Mark has been coming to your house for 3 years to have an intimate relationship with Lisa? What is it? He asked, trying to grasp the full scale of the situation. Not always, but sometimes she comes to his house, and sometimes they go away for the weekend. They're going away for the weekend now, Eric said. John asked, Why are you letting them do this? Eric replied, I'm not strong enough to stop them. I tried, but Mark hit me, tied me up and warned me never to interfere again, otherwise I would regret it. Lisa just laughed in my face. John, I haven't been intimate with my wife in 3 years. We can't even sleep in the same bed. Well, we will use this opportunity to gain a significant advantage in the divorce process. They completed all the necessary paperwork, after which John contacted his friend Steve, who was visiting his parents in the city. Hi, Steve, John greeted him. This is John. I'm calling to ask for one of those services that you owe me, he said. Of course, dude. What can I do for you? Steve answered. My friend Eric needs to get out of town and stay at the bottom for a while. You said you were leaving town soon. I was wondering if you could take him with you and let him stay with you for a while, John said. No problem, just bring him to my parents when he's ready, Steve casually remarked. John successfully escorted Eric out of town. When Mark and Lisa returned to their home on Sunday evening, they were surprised to find John waiting for them on the porch. Embarrassed, Lisa asked. Lisa was worried, clutching Mark's hand tightly, because until now their relationship had been kept secret. John replied calmly, I'm waiting for you. Lisa couldn't help but wonder, shouldn't you be at home with Eric? Lisa asked, Where is Eric? I'm waiting for him, but it looks like he's not here. John walked over to Lisa and Mark and handed them the folder with the divorce papers. Consider them officially handed over to you, John said, heading for his car. Lisa curiously opened the folder and looked through the contents. Divorce? Is this some kind of joke? Eric would never divorce me, Lisa exclaimed. John replied, It's obvious that he wants a divorce. He mentioned your alleged 3-year affair. Could this be true? Shocked, Mark and Lisa exchanged glances. John suggested, By the way, if you and your lawyer want to challenge the divorce or the proposed division of property, feel free to contact my office. When John was leaving, Lisa begged, John, please don't leave. Tell me where he is. I demand to know his whereabouts. John replied, I have no idea where he is. He said he had to leave town because he thought you or Mark would try to force him to stay married. We will contact him soon. Good night. Although John chuckled, he knew that he still had a lot to discuss. On Monday afternoon, Lisa and her lawyer, George Williams, turned up at John's office. My client is aware of the situation, George began. Infidelity in itself is not a sufficient reason for the dissolution of the marriage, but he claims that 3 years of blatant infidelity and hostility on your part and on Mark's part have led to irreconcilable differences. He decided to end the marriage before you could spend most of his money on gifts for Mark. like a new car. My client believes that this is all a misunderstanding, as you can see from the proposed settlement terms. Lisa said in despair, "All I need is 5 minutes with Eric and we can resolve this whole situation." John replied, "Yes, that's exactly what he seemed to agree with when he came to me on Saturday. He was sure that if he saw you, he would change his mind about getting a divorce. He left town to avoid your demands. It seems Eric has finally stood up for himself after 3 years of a relationship." "I can't blame you for not wanting a divorce, Lisa," Lisa exclaimed furiously. "You have no right to talk to me like that, you son of a bitch," John replied calmly. "As Eric's lawyer, I am informing you that you will lose a lot in this divorce. As Eric's friend, I want to say that I am disappointed with your actions. And as your brother, I'm telling you that I'm disappointed in you personally. Besides, the division of the family property should have already been discussed with Mark. We demand significant financial compensation for his participation in all this." Lisa, unable to contain her anger, slapped John hard in the face. "George, I suggest you tell your client to leave. If she attacks me again, I will have to go to the police," John warned. Feeling the futility of the situation, George proposed to Lisa, "Let's go. It is clear that we will achieve nothing here." With that, George and Lisa left the room. At noon, Kelly walked into John's office and immediately hit him with all her might. "I was hit twice today. The first time I could still understand, but now I don't understand why you're hitting me," John said. "How can you side with Eric against your own sister? I know Eric is your friend, but how could you betray Lisa like that?" Kelly exclaimed. "When I found out what Lisa had been doing with Eric for the last 3 years, her status as my sister ceased to matter," John said. "What? What are you talking about? What do you think Lisa has been doing with Eric for 3 years?" asked Kelly. "Mark," John said. "Mark? What do you mean by Mark?" Kelly asked. "Lisa has been having an affair with Mark for 3 years now, and even worse, she made sure Eric knew about it. They even forced him to witness their intimate activities together. They hadn't had sex in 3 years, and he couldn't even sleep in his own bed. Lisa spent Eric's money on Mark, even bought him a new car, and they both treated Eric terribly," John explained. "Eric came to me, told me what was going on, and asked me to help him get out. So I'm helping him," John defended himself. Kelly was at a loss. She had no idea that Lisa was acting like this. No one knew. They kept it a secret for 3 years. "Why? Why did Eric put up with this for so long?" Kelly wondered. "Because he's the kind of guy who takes the easy way out because he was weak. Now he finally began to resist. Now he is trying to restore his dignity and end his marriage with his cheating wife," John said. Lisa tried to prevent a divorce and demanded a court order for a personal meeting with Eric. John came to the hearing about the face-to-face meeting, but Eric did not attend it. "Your Honor, if only I could see my husband, we could sort everything out and move on," Lisa pleaded. "Your Honor, she's wrong. If she had only had 5 minutes alone with my client, he would have given up. But that's exactly what he asked me to prevent. He doesn't want to see her until the divorce is finalized," John explained. "Why?" the judge asked. "Your Honor, my client is naturally shy and submissive. For 3 years he did nothing while his wife shared a bed with another man, spent money on him, humiliated, physically bullied and bullied him. My client knows that if he sees her, she can easily manipulate him into canceling the divorce and returning to her. He doesn't want to come back. He wants this nightmare to end," John explained. "I see. So you're saying that a face-to-face meeting will lead to your client returning to a hostile environment?" The judge asked the question. "Yes, Your Honor," John replied. "In that case, I will satisfy your client's request. The court will not schedule a personal meeting," the judge said. "Judge, please be reasonable. I need to meet him. You have to get him to come and talk to me," Lisa pleaded. "Girl, you are very lucky that I will not preside over your divorce if the case goes to court. If I understood the facts correctly, you have no reason to insist. Your only hope of staying married is to convince your husband to give up the divorce. But let me tell you, coercion is a criminal offense. Therefore, If you inadvertently convince him against his will, you are in danger of something much worse than divorce. You face imprisonment, the judge warned. Despite this, Lisa continued to use all possible means to arrange a meeting with Eric, and John stubbornly insisted on a divorce. George did his best to delay the process, following Lisa's wishes. However, 6 months later, John called on the judge to consider the case on its merits, despite Lisa's persistent attempts to prevent this. The judge then ordered Eric to attend the hearing. Lisa saw this as her chance, but the judge issued a restraining order against her. In addition, John and several other friends of Eric were watching him closely so that Lisa could not reach him. On the first day of the trial, Lisa was already in the courtroom when John and Eric entered. Lisa immediately rushed to Eric with a plea. "Baby, I missed you. Please tell the judge that we don't need this. Everything will be fine. You'll see." Eric was silent, staring at John. John, in turn, looked at Lisa and firmly stated, "You're wasting your time, Lisa. Eric is on his way to restoring his self-esteem, the self-esteem that you and Mark took away from him almost 4 years ago." After John's statement, the meeting began. George did his best to build an argument against divorce, but in the end he realized that the battle was lost. Instead, he focused on challenging the proposed contract and the prenuptial agreement. Then it was John's turn to introduce his side. "Your Honor, I have submitted video and photographic evidence confirming the affair between Lisa and Mark, as well as their mistreatment of my client. You have seen this evidence." "My client loved his wife, and to tell the truth, he still does," John continued. "However, after experiencing 3 years of betrayal, insults, infidelity, and lavish spending on his wife's lover, my client has reached a turning point. This turning point came, after which he turned to me for help to start the divorce process. His wife and her lover planned to leave for the weekend, which they often did. Before they left, my client heard his wife's lover express relief that she had finally allowed him to impregnate her. Considering everything my client had to go through, the idea of raising someone else's child shocked him. For the first time in 3 years, he decided to resist. He refused to tolerate that his wife had someone else's child and came to me for help. He asked me to help him get a divorce, get out of this situation, and get his real life back. I did everything in my power to support him, Your Honor. His wife and her lawyer used all the obstacles and tricks to prevent the divorce," John said. Then he turned to the judge and asked, "Do you know why, Your Honor?" The judge replied, "I have a good idea, but it needs to be stated in the protocol, so please continue." John continued, "When my client and his wife got married, she insisted on signing a prenuptial agreement with extremely strict conditions. At that time, she was in a well-paid job, and my client was a beginner. He signed the contract believing that they would be together forever. Now, the document she used to defend herself at the beginning of their marriage has turned into a nightmare for her at the end of the marriage. The document clearly states that alimony or spousal support will not be paid. It also clearly states that all financial assets will be divided based on the percentage of total income that each spouse contributes. However, 2 years after the marriage, my client was promoted to a senior position and now accounts for more than 75% of their joint income. Even if his recent increase is not taken into account, he will still receive more than 70% of all their financial assets. In addition, the document states that any property that belonged before the marriage remains the property of the original owner. Before marriage, my client's wife owned 2 small houses in an area where property values had plummeted. On the other hand, my client owned the house they lived in, which has since been improved and increased in value. Thus, the value of his property has more than tripled. As you can see, Your Honor, if the divorce goes through, my client's wife will lose a significant amount of money. The bank documents that I provided as evidence indicate her attempts to transfer funds 2 months ago. However, my client wisely froze his assets until the divorce process was completed. Your Honor, my client has proposed a settlement agreement in accordance with the terms of the prenuptial agreement. Nevertheless, My client's wife and her lawyer challenged the proposed agreement, and even questioned the validity of the prenuptial agreement itself. However, it was she who insisted on concluding the contract, carefully considering its wording to make sure it was reliable. She wanted him to be indisputable in the event of a divorce, and she succeeded. Unfortunately for her, now it's haunting her again, John explained. Now I will take some time to familiarize myself with the details of the case and make a decision. We will reconvene at 2 o'clock, the judge announced. During the break, John and Eric's friends made sure that Lisa did not approach Eric. When 2 o'clock came, everyone was looking forward to the judge's return to the courtroom. Having considered all the facts presented in this case, I have come to a decision. I am granting the divorce petition. It is obvious that Eric wants to leave, and Lisa wants to maintain financial security, the judge announced. No, you can't do that. I don't agree. I refuse to get divorced if I don't want to, Lisa protested. According to the law, I have the right to terminate this marriage. It is terminated, the judge said. John turned to Eric and congratulated him. Congratulations, my friend. You're a free man now, John said, holding out his hand. Eric hugged him. Thank you, John. I will never be able to repay you for this. You've given me so much more than just freedom. You've given me back my self-esteem, Eric said gratefully. I'm glad I could help. Now I'll be responsible for your mom and dad's vacation, but it's a small fee, Eric said. Hey, I wanted to ask you something. How do you like your new car? John asked. Eric enthusiastically replied, I like it. If Lisa hadn't bought the Challenger brand, I would have bought it for myself. I was thrilled when we came with the court's decision to take her away from Mark, Eric said. John smiled and offered, Let's get out of here. They left the courtroom, and crossing the threshold, noticed that Lisa was sitting and crying. They exchanged knowing smiles.